So I could talk a lot more about the trends and the behaviors that we watch here at Ford, and I'd be happy to do that more in the panel discussion. But we have a lot of great experts here to talk this morning, and so I'd like to hand off to our next speaker, Jenna Wolfe, who, as Annika said, she is a news correspondent with NBC with the Today Show, and we're really pleased to have her here today. So please welcome Jenna.
Hi, everybody. How are you? She's like, I do not want any part of this. You just take that. She's like, don't even record anything she's going to say. Just kidding. I'm going to start with a little story to give you an idea of where I came from and how I got here. I graduated college in, 19 God knows what, and I was offered a sportscasting job in Binghamton, New York, where basically they covered girls softball and then girls softball. And then on the weekends, they also covered girls softball. So they had a lot going on there. The New York Mets had a AA team there, the Binghamton Mets, if you know anything about them. Maybe a player or two gets called up to the big leagues. If you don't know anything about them, it wasn't exactly hard to get a ticket to this game, just to give you an idea of how popular they were. One night, mid-July, Binghamton Mets had a game. Game just ended. I was standing online waiting to go and get post-game reaction. It was my first time doing this, right? I stood outside the locker room with all the other media, who, though I didn't notice at the time, they were all men. I was the only girl. But when you're so nervous and stressed out about something, you don't notice anything else around you, right? Game ends, clubhouse opens, the PR guy comes out and he says we could all go in. Everyone except for me. Literally holds me back. Tells me I have to wait a few minutes until all the players were dressed. I told him I had no interest in seeing wee-wees. The only thing I wanted to do was get my interviews and then proceed back to the TV station and file for the 11 o'clock news. Finally, 5 minutes later, he walks me in announcing in an unreasonably loud voice that there was a lady in the locker room. Now, I don't know if I was more put off that this required an announcement or that he used the word lady. I had just turned 21. Lady was not a word in my vocabulary. If you're in your 20s, nobody wants to be called lady, right? So I did my interviews. I clearly missed the first wave of players who did not stick around for the lady in the locker room, and I went back to the TV station. If you know anything about me, you know I complained just a little bit. It was my first time in my life anything like that had ever happened to me, ever. Why couldn't I do something that everyone else could do? I just didn't even understand it. It was never even a possibility. I was a sportscaster. They were sportscasters. I'm not sure I understand. But it happened. It was done. I wouldn't think about it again for a couple of years. After Binghamton, I got a job in Rochester, also doing sports. From there, I got a job in Philadelphia, also doing sports. And I was given an assignment to cover the NBA championships, Lakers versus Sixers, okay? I sat through the game. It came time for post-game. Walked down to the locker room with all the other media. Once again, I found myself standing outside the locker room with all the other media, doors open, mass flood of reporters go flying into a shoebox of a locker room. This time, though, instead of being held back because I was a lady, I was held back for a credential check. It's like I had no luck with post-game reaction. Sure enough, everyone runs past me, and I was once again in jeopardy of missing the first wave of players, right? But unlike 5 years prior, there was no way I was going to miss out. So as soon as I was clear, I run into the locker room, and I run over to Dikembe Mutombo's locker. He was like a 9'7" senior, played for the Sixers at the time. He had a pretty big game. That was the guy we had to get. But there was this massive crowd of people around him. If anyone's ever seen what these locker rooms look like, it was like 19 players deep. And as much as I poked the microphone in and on top, I was not getting in. I was not penetrating this mob outside. And he was already starting to do his interviews. So I came up with an idea. I told my cameraman, you shoot. I'm going to get my mic in there. He's like, how? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Hoist your camera up and you shoot. I got down on my hands and knees, and I was going to crawl to the front of the scrum. No joke, if by some chance you were covering the game with me that day, you know I actually did this. I got down on my hands and knees. I was probably wearing a dress just like this one, and I'm crawling through legs. It was dark, just moving past people. It was like, what? No one cared. Went to the front. All of a sudden, I saw a little bit of daylight, right? I figured I was there. I had just finally gotten to Dikembe Mutombo, and in my head, this is how I saw this playing out. I was going to sneak through, stand up, ask my questions, ride off into the sunset with my interview. I had not for 1 second considered any other possibilities until another possibility came along. So I saw the daylight. I nudged my way up to a kneeling position right in front, and as I brought my head up to look straight ahead, there was Dikembe Mutombo, sitting on a low bench, in a towel, with nothing underneath him, legs spread wide open, comfortably taking questions from the media. Did I get to the front? You're damn right I got to the front. Was I now face to face with Dikembe Mutombo? I was face to something, right? So what's the moral of the story besides don't go crawling around places where well-endowed men sit around in just a towel? Be aggressive, right? Fight for your right to be where you want to be when you want to be there, and don't take any other answer besides yes for an answer. Well, I mean, yes. Okay, so that was just a cute story of perseverance working out in a weird way. I could tell you a million stories of what I had to do to get from A to B just to be able to keep up with the guys that did it right next to me. The career detours, skirting office politics, the long hours. But the takeaway is I couldn't have done any of that without the people who did it before me. And in the sportscasting business, it was the women who did it before me and paved this amazing path for me to do so. They were the trailblazers. Times are changing, yes. We are doing it differently now in the sportscasting world. Will they ever change fast enough for everyone? Of course not. Are they perfect? Of course not. We wouldn't be here today if they were. I've met amazing women in this industry, amazing women who were so much more creative than getting down on their hands and knees to try to get up close and personal with Dikembe Mutombo. Strong, smart, fearless women who know no other way than their way, like this woman, Annie Griffiths, the first female photographer at National Geographic. I met her last year. It was a throwaway assignment, go down to Washington to interview Annie Griffiths. Turned out to be one of the most amazing women I've ever met in my entire life. She's incredible. She's sweet, and she's down to earth, and she's kind, and she's fierce behind her lens. She traveled the world when most women just weren't doing that. She didn't want to choose between her children and her career, so she packed up her children, small children, and she took them with her on every continent in the world so she could work and have her kids with her at the same time. She let me join her for a shoot for that Today Show piece I was telling you about. 5 minutes with her. I wanted to run for president. I wanted to save an endangered species. I wanted to do 1,000 push-ups. It was just one of those things that when you're around someone amazing like that, it's sort of via osmosis kind of just pours off onto you. Sort of like Jennifer Senior, who's going to be coming up talking after me. Can I get an extra 8 seconds back because I just did something on Jennifer? Other women I've interviewed that have really changed my life. Not women you've probably ever heard of. Do you guys know Jennifer Kaler? Of course you probably don't. She was walking with her 1.5-year-old out in California into a grocery store. A car backed out, and her 1.5-year-old pulled away, and the car ran over little Patrick's neck. He was instantly paralyzed from the neck down. She found out she was pregnant at the time. Her husband left her because they couldn't afford the medical bills, and her son, at 1.5, was suddenly quadriplegic. We featured her son Patrick, who's now 16, a few times on the show, who vowed to walk across stage for graduation. Walk across stage. Somehow, in 4 years, he managed to get himself onto crutches and wheels, and he walked across stage. It was the most amazing thing. Google it. I promise you it's worth it. She did it on her own as a single mom, made a life for her and her son and her daughter with nothing more than heart and confidence. She was one of these people, just like Annie, that I absolutely respect. You cannot help but be inspired by women like these. They did not listen to society say, I'm not sure the timing is right. They just did it anyway. So it's no surprise that me, personally, Jenna Wolfe, ended up in a male-dominated field my first couple of years. I bucked the system from an early age. My parents unknowingly guided my brother and me towards specific gender roles, right? My dad would build Lego toys and fix things with my brother, and my mom pushed me to pink. The tea sets and the games and the toys and everything pink. I liked some of it, but I didn't like all of it. You know, I wanted to do other things. I didn't love the cars and the destruction and the planes, but I did love running around, and I certainly wasn't afraid to skim my knees. I mean, I was basically playing in I would call it a male-dominated field before I was working in one. I loved PE. I was the only girl who loved PE. I was the only girl on the soccer field during recess. I was the only girl playing tag after school. And as a kid living in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, where I grew up, it was no big deal. Interestingly enough, when I moved to the United States, it became a big deal because as a freshman at high school, the girls didn't think it was cool that I was playing sports. And we all have high school horror stories. But I lived through one. I was teased and taunted. I didn't get spoken to or invited to a single thing my freshman year of high school because I loved playing volleyball and basketball. It was unheard of. But we all have high school horror stories, so I'm not going to get into mine. I covered sports 12 years before I came to the Today Show in 2007. There have been a ton of hiccups along the way, right? When I was doing sports, I was constantly having the following conversation with guys, constantly, where they were trying to trip me up by pretending to be casual and asking me how I'm doing. So this is how it went. Me, hey Jerry, how you feeling? I heard you were out sick last week. Jerry, hey Jenna, do you know the last time the Yankees beat the Tigers when one or more players were out sick? Hey Bob, what's new? Hey Jenna, can you name 3 new MLS teams? Constantly, this is what it was all about. It was I say hi and you say, well, let me ask you a trivia question that you probably can't answer. But that was okay. all it did was made me work harder. So minus having to work harder to cross my T's and dot the I's, I had no complaints, really. I mean, it took me a turn or two off the runway, but I've been accepted, I think, for the most part, as a woman covering sports. I've been accepted as a daredevil at the Today Show. I mean, I love doing things that were once years and years and years and years and years ago reserved for the boys. It keeps me on my toes, it keeps me focused, and it keeps me challenged, most importantly. I mean, I was more well-read, well-prepared, well-studied when I was covering sports than I ever was at any point in my entire life. And I loved it. I really did. You know, there's something I always tell people. I'm a personal trainer. I say this to people all the time. I say, do one thing every single day that scares you. One thing that scares you. I don't care what it is. Say hi to a stranger, take a Zumba class, ask for a raise, break up with the jerk you've been dating, give a speech, stop smoking, jump off a high dive, walk into a locker room full of hardened male sportscasters, and go ask questions. Do something today you would never in a million years have dreamt of doing yesterday. And then watch growth happen. Because that's how it happens. It happens when you step right outside your comfort zone and you try to play in that space right there. Of all the things I've done in my life, the scariest thing I ever did came last year when I went on national television and I announced to the world that I was pregnant, that my partner and I were expecting a baby. It was a far cry from any other sandbox of fear I had ever played in. This was lightly chartered territory. I was trailblazing for the most part. No one at the Today Show had ever done this before. Some thought I was nuts. My parents asked me why in the world I would ever want to do something like that, why I would open myself up to hatred and criticism. For what? What was the takeaway? But the Today Show believed in me, and Stephanie believed in me, and most importantly, I believed in me. So here's how it went. But let me just take one quick step back and be very clear about something. We are absolutely not the first same-sex couple to live together and raise a child. Thousands and thousands of brave men and women have done it before us. We were just going to do it in kind of a scary way. I'm never going to forget that day. I was sitting next to Matt Lauer right on the couch, and he said something like, if I can remember, he said, so Jenna Wolfe is here, and she has an announcement to make, and he looked at me, and the camera faced me, and the crew stared at me. And I thought to myself, so this is it? This is me standing on the edge of a cliff overlooking my last 39 years, about to soar or about to sink. About to either make the best decision I've ever made in my entire life or the worst decision. Here I am. I am acknowledging my own crossroads. I'm right here. I'm about to do it. Do I come out on national television? Do I forget the whole thing and just announce that I'm pregnant and leave the rest out of it? Do I just sit here and keep asking myself questions while dead air fills the open room? I opened my mouth, and out came my truth. And I owned it. And it scared the shit out of me, trust me. But it turned out to be the best thing I have ever done in my entire life. Right? I got more emails of support, more stories from other people who have contemplated doing the same thing, more letters from folks who are going to start putting up pictures of their partners at work now. I'm not trying to change your mind to do something that you don't want to do or are not ready to do. I am certainly not standing on a soapbox up here. I don't walk around holding a flag or tell you you need to be a certain person. I'm not preaching, but I will tell you that that made me feel good. And I know exactly who I am, and I feel fantastic about it. I'm not there yet, right? We're all a work in progress. And if someone tells you that they're there or that they've arrived, well, they haven't, okay? But I know this. I know every little move I've made along my winding way, running around with the boys in grade school, playing sports in high school, covering sports when a few men were doing it, and finally announcing my pregnancy and coming out on national TV. All of that has been my way of saying, what gender roles? I am who I am today. I am where I am today because I ignored all of them and because I watched the brave women who did it before me. We've made a lot of progress. We've come a very far way, but we aren't there yet. Otherwise, again, we wouldn't be here today. And I'd like to think that every fight we wage, large or small, makes it a little easier for those who come after us, and it gets us just a little bit closer to the common goal. Although I wouldn't want any sports reporter to get any closer to Dikembe Mutombo. Thank you very much.